Souls-like games are a dime a dozen, with the continued success of From Software's titles like Sekiro, Bloodborne, and most recently Elden Ring. With this rise in popularity, it is becoming harder and harder for each new title to stand out. Series like Nioh and The Surge have been able to carve out their own space in the genre, but for all the others, they have struggled to find any footing. Lies of P is no different and faces the same challenges of being a newcomer in a genre filled with competition. Developed by NeoWiz and Round 8 Studios, Lies of P was revealed in May 2021 with a cinematic trailer and adorned with a simple explanation. A Souls-like game inspired by the classic story of Pinocchio. It started generating hype at expos like Summer Games Fest and Gamescom as it showed off visceral combat and teased the dark retelling of Pinocchio. The moniker Bloodborne 2 caught on and quickly continued to drive excitement, but there was always doubt surrounding the title that it could separate itself from its competitor. Now it is released into the wild and we can finally answer. Can Lies of P stand out? Or is it only a lifeless puppet? Hello! I do go into spoilers about the endgame, both bosses and story, so please tread carefully. Spoilers, be warned. Lies of P begins with waking up in an abandoned train station as the playable character, Pete, short for Pinocchio. Something sinister has clearly occurred here. As I work through the small area, I am quickly introduced to our first challenge and source of terror in the train station, a police puppet that has seemingly gone crazy. It's an intense fight and does a great job of helping me learn the controls. I got a strong sense of how the basic systems of combat worked. Once I take out the puppet, I can move forward and am introduced to the mechanical world of Krot. Krot is diverse and beautifully crafted. From the city streets filled with piles of both human and puppet corpses, to the convention halls of wondrous inventions, I was excited to explore each new and unique location. There was no point in this game where the setting disappointed. From the enemy design to the harrowing side stories, there is something unique and terrifying around each corner. I was always interested to look for hidden secrets and see what Krot had to offer. The way the developers were able to loop each area around into itself made the world feel real and truly thought out, not something cobbled together. Whenever I found a shortcut, I was filled with a tremendous sense of progression and was able to look back at where I came from. The interconnectedness of Krot is a strong suit of Lies of P. But while Krot is engaging and enticed me to scour through each area with some exceptional level design, the overall exploration left something to be desired. I wanted to go off the beaten path and see what I could find. Rarely was I able to. Each time I seemed to go onto a road less traveled, it ended up as either a closed off alleyway or a short loop that led right back to the main path. I yearned to see more, and this made me feel limited. Krot is teeming with secrets, but each secret was only around the next corner. To my disappointment, there was never an opportunity to stray down a path that opened into a hidden area. The overall gameplay loop of Lies of P is one deeply rooted in a typical Soulsborne experience, and the developers nail it. Fighting each enemy is tense, and defeating more difficult enemies, I'm rewarded with a fulfilling sense of accomplishment. The tools at your disposal to take down the enemies in your path are numerous. You have your melee weapon, which ranges from poison polearms to heavy-hitting police batons, Fable Arts, which are powerful attacks or abilities that can turn the tide of each fight, your left arm, which can be given a specific ability, like a hook that drags enemies closer, or a burst of shock damage. You have a Pulse Cell Charge, which is your ever-replenishing healing item, along with many items you can purchase or pick up, like a rusty cog. And finally, parrying. Parrying is one of, if not my most favorite system in this game. Finding some middle ground between Sekiro's insanely fast-paced, reaction-based combat and Dark Souls' methodical approach to every encounter, parrying is a risk-reward situation. If I parried too early, I would take some damage. Parry at the perfect time, and I wouldn't take any chip damage. Parrying was further incentivized by Guard Regain. What this mechanic offers is similar to Bloodborne's HP recovery after taking a hit. It encourages aggression after parrying imperfectly. I could either retreat momentarily to heal with one of my pulse cell charges, or I could push in and try to steal my life back. This goes both ways, however. My enemies also benefit from Guard Regain. They slowly regain health for a portion of what I damage them. This further pushed me to be aggressive, and sometimes it led me to take unnecessary risks because I wanted to prevent my foes from regaining too much life. I couldn't stop parrying throughout my playtime in Lies of P. Even when I was struggling with the timing for the perfect parry window and it was ultimately detrimental to me, I continued to parry. Not only did I feel like a complete badass when I was perfectly parrying a chain of attacks, but if I successfully parried enough times, I would break my enemies' weapons. This could happen to both normal enemies as well as bosses. When their weapons break, they deal significantly less damage, and truly made me feel as though I accomplished something in that fight. It turned the tides of battle and was a fun way to see my progress throughout a single fight. What I did find disappointing was that there wasn't one actual reward for breaking their weapons. No useful item or piece of weaponry, just nothing. It would have been cool to take the defeated enemy's weapon and be able to turn it into something useful later on, like in Monster Hunter, and unfortunately that never happened. Aside from parrying, Lies of P's gameplay feels similar to Dark Souls 2. Movement is kind of sluggish, and there was no real sense of momentum as I ran around Krot. Even when I was sprinting, I still felt slow. This is one of the weaker aspects of Lies of P's gameplay. This feeling of a lack of speed also impacts dodging, which is the weakest aspect of the overall gameplay of Lies of P. One path of upgrading is through the P organ system. Finding quartz, an extremely rare resource, gives you the opportunity to spend it on different upgrades. What is cool about this is that you can get some significant buffs to both your attack and your defense, upgrade how many pulse cell charges you have, and plenty more. This is a unique way of slowly giving the player more power with immediate buffs, and also providing short-term goals for another boost in power that you had to invest multiple pieces of quartz into. Whenever I found a quartz, I was excited to slot it in and get an upgrade to my overall power. I bring this up now because several upgrades you can invest in are to upgrade your dodge ability. The initial dodge feels terrible to use. You don't get much distance and the iframes are minimal. This led me to not engage with dodging and instead I chose to parry. There was one instance where an enemy had an attack that I struggled to parry, and it continued to smack me into the ground. Because I couldn't roll to get up, which is a standard mechanic, I continued to get smacked into the ground over and over and over and over again. It felt terrible to fight this enemy, and it felt cheap. I only started to invest in the dodge because of this encounter. From being able to extend the dodge, which is really just 2 dodges in quick succession, to being able to roll as you get up. This is not a fun upgrade. Upgrading the dodge in theory is okay, but in practice it feels bad to get it to where it should have been in the first place. I view these upgrades as filler. Overall though, I truly enjoyed Lies of P's gameplay. I didn't use the left arm ability much, and when I did, I didn't feel like it gave me much of an edge in any fight. I felt as though my own skill with parrying, using my weapon, and occasionally dodging was more than enough to sufficiently tackle each challenge. All of the weapons I acquired had both a blade, or head, and a hilt. I was free to create any 2 combinations that I would like, and it drastically changed my playstyle due to a couple factors. It can change the weapon's attack speed, making them either faster or slower. It can add various status effects. And the big change is Fable Arts, allowing me to choose any 2 combinations I would like. I admittedly did not use this system as much as I could have. I fiddled around with it at the beginning, but then I found a weapon that I gelled with, and I stuck with it for the rest of my playthrough. You can upgrade weapons in a typical Souls-like fashion. You find materials, in this case moonstones, to upgrade your weapons either in the world or through defeating enemies, bring them over to a blacksmith, and then use the materials in varying amounts as you level up, along with paying a bit of ergo, which is the in-game currency. I was able to get my 2 favorite weapons to max level at a good pace, and I never felt as though I was unable to get the materials I needed to upgrade my weapons. Whenever I struggled against a tough opponent, I never thought it was my weapons that were holding me back. The weapon power increase felt good throughout my playtime, and if anything, I almost felt too strong at times. An additional way to upgrade P is by finding various items that can be equipped that improve P's armor and resistances to different status effects. This was by far the most uninspired way to increase power in the game. These defense parts, which includes frames, converters, cartridges, and liners, can all be upgraded. These are items that can be found throughout Krot, and all it is a simple numbers game. I didn't feel stronger, and it is harder to notice any impact that these upgrades had on my actual gameplay. I was hoping there was something more to each of these items, but there never was, and it made this upgrade system boring. I just threw on whichever had the highest number and continued playing. The story in Lies of P is, for the most part, compelling and has some powerful emotional beats that lay scattered throughout my 30 hours with the game. It starts off creepy, focusing on puppets and the massacre that happened by their inhuman hands, and it pushes further, going down an unexpected rabbit hole. The story slowly moved from corrupted puppets and evolved into one about the struggle for power and the lengths man will go to obtain it. Every action leads to further losing yourself. The main antagonist, Simon Manus, has an ever-looming presence throughout the game, and the story is really his own struggle with power, allowing himself to be overtaken by lust for more and more power. In this sense, it's similar to Walter White from Breaking Bad. Walter relished being feared, being intimidating. He loved his descent into corruption. I see these parallels with Simon. He continued his journey with a smile on his face, unaffected by the consequences that followed his actions. Simon never truly stood out to me as an interesting villain, but knowing that he was in the shadows, waiting to make his next move, had me excited to press on. The other characters that I came across did have an impact on me. Antonia, Polendina, Sophia, Alidoro, and the King of Riddles all were interesting and had their moments that really stood out. Several of these are hiding behind simple side quests, but their emotional tone worked for me. I connected with their struggles and the difficulties they had. What is love, and what represents love? Who can love? The relationships that blossom, the feeling of P becoming more and more of a real boy? These are some of the questions and moments that truly made me feel sympathy for these characters. And what further pushed these emotional moments was the music and sounds in the world of Krot. The music is extremely mellow, never staying past its welcome, and never becoming the main focus, but always adding an additional layer to every encounter. This could be while upgrading in the main hub, listening to a track you can unlock, stressing in a boss fight, or just wandering the world and coming across an ambient track from a survivor. The music and sounds pull you in, further asking you to see all of what Krot has to offer. The metallic clank of puppets endlessly walking around, the ting of a perfect parry, the hiss of fire. It is cohesive, and I felt immersed as I poured more and more time into this adventure. One bit that did fall short for me were unfortunately the bosses. While the design for the bosses were interesting and for the most part looked unique and different, the actual fights themselves were lacking. Each boss fight had a second phase. This led to each boss fight feeling repetitive because I expected another phase. I expected a change in every single boss fight, and it lost its luster after the first few. This is a trend that is becoming prevalent in Souls-like games and is starting to become unimaginative. This also goes for the overall design of the boss encounters. Bosses were either large puppet enemies or smaller humanoid enemies. This became bland. The excitement of learning the moveset of each boss and the way that I can approach each encounter was lost. When fighting a large puppet boss, they are slow but hit hard. They have some type of AoE attack that can cause a status effect, and they have a second phase. It's a struggle to make large, hulking enemies unique, and Lies of P fails in that regard. The smaller humanoid bosses were faster, and it felt like a dance to fight with them when dodging and parrying their attacks quickly. The problem lies with how easily it is to overcome those humanoid bosses. Every single one has the exact same issue. Dodge to the left or right, circle behind them, and proceed to backstab them. This loop can be easily manipulated, and it makes the fights against these bosses feel trivial at best. Some of them were hyped up in the story, and once I got to them, I felt lame for defeating them the way that I did. Maybe this is because I have enjoyed Soulsborne games for a while now, but I was disappointed with the overall difficulty of these bosses. There were a few boss fights that absolutely stood out, however. It is almost unfortunate that they appeared so late in the game. These fights were incredible. These bosses had unique mechanics, were perfectly balanced, were rewarding to learn, and left a positive, lasting impression on me. One of them reminded me of one of my absolute personal favorite boss fights in any game franchise, Phantom Ganon from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. This boss in Lies of P sent electric bolts at me, which I could perfectly parry to send the bolts right back at them. The parried bullets would stun them and bring them down to the ground, and I loved to rush in, get a couple of attacks in, and get out before they got back up. I absolutely adore this gameplay mechanic, and it felt great here. Not only was it a unique mechanic only used in this single fight, but it made me feel like I was actually affecting the boss with my actions rather than just slowly chipping away at a giant health bar. These boss fights were almost incomprehensible at first, But the way they are designed, I was able to slowly peel back a layer at a time, slowly breaking down the boss's attacks and how I could react to each move. It was incredibly rewarding when I was able to finally start pulling off what I had planned between each attempt. The fact that these bosses were endgame is slightly disappointing, knowing that some players may never get to the point to fight these incredible encounters. But also the fact that they were endgame leaves a truly positive impression as I finish the game. Lies of P is not a perfect game. There are some larger issues that I have that I wish could be changed in some manner. Bosses being disappointing, P's sluggish movement, lackluster equipment upgrades, but all of these issues are easy to look past when so many things were positive. The music, the world of Krat, parrying, and then some truly memorable fights left me with an enthusiastic view of my time playing Lies of P. While I don't think this game will turn people who don't enjoy Souls-like games into fans, I do think that this game can find footing in a genre that has become increasingly difficult to find a place in. Lies of P surpassed my expectations, and I can easily recommend this game to those who find these types of games enjoyable. And in my eyes, Lies of P is a must-play experience. Hey everyone, thanks for listening and watching my first ever review. I really appreciate it, and if you liked it, feel free to drop a like. And if you also want to see new reviews, which I'm working on now, feel free to subscribe. Thanks everyone, and have a beautiful day. And also, I stream on Twitch, so if you want to join there, go ahead, twitch.tv/DJJBXD. Woohoo!